In Tennessee, on April 12, 1864, a Confederate military installation named after Tennessee native General Gideon Johnson Pillow, which was taken by Union forces in 1862, was the site of the most gruesome, controversial, and little-known massacres of the Civil War. During the Battle of Fort Pillow, Confederate troops killed nearly 400 black Union soldiers, and this was after they had surrendered, because the Confederacy refused to treat black soldiers as traditional prisoners of war. This massacre would become a rallying point for those enslaved and fighting for their freedom. Eventually, black Union soldiers would use "Remember Fort Pillow" as their battle cry. "40 miles north of Memphis, Tennessee, on the Mississippi River stood Fort Pillow. Though well protected on a high bluff, Confederate troops evacuated the fort in order to avoid being cut off from the rest of the Confederate Army on June 4, 1862. 2 days later, Union forces occupied Fort Pillow, using it to protect their approach to Memphis. By the end of 1862, the number of white volunteers in the Union Army was on a steady decline, while the number of escaped slaves, or as they were classified by the Union Army, contraband, was on the increase. Wrestling with the idea of authorizing the recruitment of black troops, President Abraham Lincoln was concerned that such a move would prompt the border states to secede. The deployment of black men as U.S. soldiers, combined with Lincoln's issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation, profoundly pissed off the Confederates. They called it, quote, uncivilized, end quote, which is kind of ironic when it was the Confederacy who fought to keep human beings in bondage. That's not very civilized when you stop to think about it. In May of 1863, the Confederacy responded by passing a law stating that all black U.S. soldiers, quote, captured while fighting against the Confederacy would be turned over to the state where the captured would be tried according to state laws, end quote. Simply put, they would be executed. On April 12, 1864, at 10 a.m., General Nathan Bedford Forrest, who would later serve as the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan in the early years of Reconstruction, led the raid to take back Fort Pillow. 1,500 to 2,500 Confederate cavalrymen surrounded the fort. For the Union soldiers, the poorly constructed fortifications made the defense of Fort Pillow difficult. Confederate sharpshooters kept up constant fire throughout the day. Major Lionel F. Booth was killed by a sniper's bullet. His inexperienced second officer, Major William Bradford, assumed command. By 3:30 p.m., Forrest sent a note demanding the Union soldiers' unconditional surrender. Major Bradford refused to surrender, and Forrest then ordered his bugler to sound the charge. The Confederates came in like a furious tidal wave. Forrest's men massacred most of the Union soldiers in cold blood. Surviving members of the garrison said that most of their men surrendered and threw down their arms, only to be shot or bayoneted by the attackers, who repeatedly shouted, "No quarter, no quarter." Confederate casualties were comparatively low, 14 killed and 86 wounded. On April 24, 1864, the New York Times reported, quote, out of 400 Negro soldiers, only about 20 survived, end quote. The remains of those killed were moved to Memphis National Cemetery in 1867. 109 of the graves have been identified. For decades afterward, it was denied by the South that this massacre even took place. Eventually, it had become one of many horrific Civil War battles forgotten by time. But in 2005, historian Andrew Ward reached the conclusion that an atrocity in the modern sense did in fact occur at Fort Pillow. But, quote, the event was not premeditated nor officially sanctioned by Confederate commanders, end quote. In 1974, Fort Pillow was preserved as the Fort Pillow State Historic Park and was designated a National Historic Landmark. The signs at the Fort Pillow site barely refer to the many black soldiers who were slaughtered. It wasn't until April 12, 2017, that a wreath-laying ceremony with color guard and 21-gun salute was held at the cemetery to commemorate them. By 1963, marches in and around the Capitol were becoming rare, and this one, a march to advocate for the civil and economic rights of Negroes, was not particularly popular. A Gallup poll just a few weeks before the march revealed that 80% of Americans knew about it, and of those, only 20% approved, while 42% did not. 18% thought it wouldn't accomplish anything, and would most likely end in violence. President John F. Kennedy, who was trying to get civil rights legislation through Congress, tried to talk A. Philip Randolph, the titular head of the march, and Bayard Rustin, the deputy organizer, out of it. Over 500 cameramen, technicians, and correspondents from the major television and radio networks covered the event. The event also featured many prominent celebrities of the day, including Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier, James Baldwin, Jackie Robinson, Sammy Davis Jr., Ruby Dee, Diane Carroll, and Lena Horne. A large number of white celebrities came to support the cause as well, such as James Garner, Charlton Heston, Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward, Marlon Brando, and Burt Lancaster, among others. The March for Jobs and Freedom in Washington is credited with propelling the U.S. government into action on civil rights, creating political momentum for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
This has been African American History is American History. I'm Harlan Kearsley. Thank you for listening. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe. Once you do, you'll be notified as soon as new episodes are posted. Thanks again, and please stay safe. African American History is American History. Copyright H.C. Kearsley, 2025.